Dead Island is a franchise spanning 7 games, from the original Dead Island, way back in 2010, through to Dead Island 2, released last year. And it is anticipated that there will be at least one more game to finish this story. In this video, I'll be going through each of the games in chronological order. So come with me as we take a trip from the islands of Banoi to the City of Angels, as we follow the story of Dead Island so far. In 2001, Asgardian scientist Dr. Reuben Reed makes a horrifying discovery, that inside all human DNA is what he describes as a clock, which is ticking down to 0. Asgardian have not been able to isolate a single set of genes responsible for this clock, and it cannot be safely removed. Dr. Reed believes the first populations are likely to hit 0 in the year 2160, with a margin of error of 12 years. With this discovery, Asgardian commences research designed to see what happens when the clock hits 0. In doing so, they tasked a group called the Consortium, and through them, Geofarm, to commence experiments aimed at making this clock hit 0 in test subjects, to see what it will mean for humanity when it happens naturally. Decades prior to the outbreaks in the Banoi archipelago, Ronald Emery started Geofarm, a pharmaceutical company dedicated to finding cures for diseases including Kuru. While the company was originally based in San Francisco, media attention drew Ronald to build a series of laboratories on the islands of the Banoi archipelago, including on the island of Banoi and Narapella, 2 islands that are only a few miles apart. Ronald recruited Chase Barrister, a young postdoc from Shanwick University, to assist him in his research and establishing the labs. Chase's research resulted in the Hewitt-Kahn Enzyme Accelerator, or HKEA, which is believed to be a potential cure for the Kuru virus. Initially, experiments were conducted on Kuru-infected anemones, but after Ronald's son Emery seizes control of the company in the name of the Palm Garden Order, the extent of the experimentation grew and continued with the use of human subjects, including the native people of the nearby Banoi Island. Some of the natives were kept on Narapella for further experimentation, while others were returned to Banoi under supervision. After Emery seized control, he killed Chase Barrister and had experiments conducted on Chase's wife, which left her disfigured. These actions caused their young son Kevin to swear vengeance on the Palm Garden Order and would eventually lead him to join the Consortium. On the 18th of July 2006, 2 weeks prior to the Banoi outbreak, Banoi Island Defense Force Colonel Ryder White is being interviewed and is asked if he is willing to kill civilians, fellow soldiers, children, and his own wife. Ryder answers affirmatively for each of these, though when questioned about his wife, he hesitated before saying yes. There are 2 people observing the interview who comment on this hesitation and whether Ryder would push the button. The man indicates that Ryder's wife is the best chance of slowing him down. Conveniently, Ryder's wife Emily was employed as the chief medical officer at the Banoi High Security Prison about 6 months prior to the Banoi outbreak. She convinced Ryder to move to Banoi with her, and he took up a position training the Banoi Island Defense Force. 2 days prior to the Banoi outbreak, an operative Kilo 2 is infiltrating a geofarm lab on the island of Narapella. Kilo 2's mission is to eliminate a mole who is working with the international terrorist and hacker Charon, aka Kevin Barrister. Entering the lab, Kilo 2 realizes that there has been an incident and the virus the lab was working on has escaped containment, infecting those working in the facility. Kilo 2 is able to make his way through the lab, speaking on the radio with his contact, Xian Mei, who is on the island of Banoi. Kilo 2 finds the mole and kills him before speaking with Charon over the radio. Kilo 2 then goes to leave the lab with the data he recovered, but realizes that the virus has escaped the facility and the island has been overwhelmed. Believing he will not be able to escape, and realizing that he is being followed by something big, Kilo 2 stashes the data, telling Xian that it will be there to be retrieved. Kilo 2 is then attacked by that something big, and presumably dies off-screen. During the start of the outbreak on Banoi, rapper Sam B is performing for guests of the Royal Palms Hotel. While the party goes on outside, investigative journalist Roger Hewitt slips away into the hotel. He is chasing a story about the illegal exploitation of Banoi's natural resources and was given a tip that afternoon that the hotel manager, Kenneth Billard, was involved in the illegal activity, including a money laundering operation. Roger had bribed a maid to leave the door to the manager's office unlocked, and he is able to go through Kenneth's files. But instead of finding the evidence he was looking for, he found a file on 4 people connected to the hotel. Roger is confused as these people would not be involved in the logging operation, so he wonders what makes them so special. The files are on Perna Jackson, a former police officer turned high-end bodyguard, Logan Carter, a disgraced former NFL player, the rapper Sam B, and Jian Mei, an undercover police officer working at the hotel as a clerk. As Roger muses over the files, thinking that it makes no sense for them to be here, he hears someone at the door. Thinking that he is busted, he opens the door, saying that he was just looking for the bathroom. But upon opening the door, he finds a zombie in front of him. Back at the party, the 4 people about whom the files were written are all present during the initial outbreak, but they all manage to make it back to their hotel rooms, waking up the next morning in the midst of a zombie apocalypse. One of the survivors makes their way through the hotel, taking in the devastation that has occurred and finding the parents from the Dead Island trailer still in their room, though not reanimated. This survivor is contacted by a voice coming over the hotel speaker, who gives them directions. The survivor escapes a group of zombies before being knocked unconscious. They awaken again, this time in a beach hut with a group of survivors. They are told they were rescued by a lifeguard, John Cinemoy, who is currently fending off zombies outside the hut. They head out to help Cinemoy, and after the zombies are eliminated, Cinemoy is contacted over the radio by someone who claims to have a way off the island, if the group can get to him. Cinemoy asks where the voice is, but the signal is cut off. Cinemoy then tells the survivor that the voice told him the survivor was in trouble at the hotel, and was immune to the virus. Cinemoy didn't believe it at the time, but given the bite marks, he believes it now. Cinemoy says they will need to move everyone to the lifeguard tower, as there is more equipment there and a stronger radio with an antenna. The immune survivors are tasked with getting the keycard for the lifeguard tower from Cinemoy's bungalow, and then with clearing the lifeguard tower of the infected. With these tasks complete, Cinemoy and the other survivors from the hut make the trip to the lifeguard tower. With the virus spreading, Colonel Ryder White is tasked with containing the outbreak. He orders the evacuation center operated by the Benoi Island Defense Force to close, and for the soldiers there to kill all of the people who had been exposed to the disease. Major Dixon was running the evacuation point and is now in charge of ensuring the infected are eliminated. He is also using the facility as a proving ground for his men. Along with the closure of the evacuation point, Ryder also orders bridges across the island to be blown in order to hinder movement of civilians to slow the spread of the disease. Ryder is in one of these helicopters targeting the bridges, but one of the other men in the helicopter is infected and turns, attacking the pilot after they hit their first target. The helicopter crashes in the Queenscliff neighbourhood of Moresby, with White being the only survivor. He is able to contact the base and asks to be picked up by Unit 4 on their way back from blowing the Old Town Bridge. Unfortunately, Ryder is informed that base has lost contact with Unit 4 while they are on the way to the bridge, meaning it has not yet been blown. Ryder decides to meet up with Unit 4 to help them accomplish their mission. He battles his way through the undead and is contacted by his wife Emily, who tells them the prison is in the midst of a riot, as they have lost control of the undead. There is a rescue helicopter heading to the prison, and Ryder tells Emily he expects her to be the first on the helicopter. Not long after speaking with Emily, White finds the remains of Unit 4, who have been wiped out by a local gang, who have also taken the explosive intended for the bridge. On his way to the gang's base, White is given an update by Emily, who has been saved by a prisoner named Kevin, and they are now barricaded in an area cut off from the rest of the prison. White makes it to the gang's base and is able to recover the explosives. He then heads for the bridge via the sewers, which have been completely overrun with the undead. The Old Town Bridge is held by more gang members, who Ryder eliminates before blowing the bridge. He reports his success to base, and they direct him to a gas station in Zone 6, where they will evacuate him from the roof. Ryder makes it to the gas station and holds off the dead until the helicopter arrives. On the helicopter, Base advises Ryder that despite his efforts, the virus has now spread across the island, and it is time he evacuate and order Executive Protocol 66, the nuclear extermination of the island. Ryder says he won't order the bombing until he knows his wife is safe. He radios Emily, and she tells him that she has been bitten and has told the rescue helicopter not to come. Emily's recordings indicate that while she was sure she had locked the door behind her and Kevin, one of the infected got in and bit her before Kevin was able to kill it. It is likely Kevin intentionally let the infected in order to later gain control of Ryder. Ryder orders the helicopter he is on to turn around and to head to the prison. Back at the lifeguard tower, the group is tasked with helping Dominic by obtaining a signal amplifier and helping Mike by obtaining fuel to enable them to cremate the bodies. With these tasks complete, Sinamoi tells the group that he has gotten the radio going and is attempting to contact the voice, but hasn't been able to get through yet. He is going to continue his attempts, but in the meantime asks the group if they can find some food for the survivors. The immune find what they can, and while Sinamoi is grateful for the group's help, he realizes that they will need some more supplies, and so he tells the group they will need to head into the city of Moresby to look for more. This will require driving through a tunnel that has been blocked and filled with the infected, but Sinamoi knows that there is a truck in the Royal Palms garage that will be able to make it through. He sends the group to the hotel to retrieve this truck. The hotel remains as overrun as the rest of the island, but shortly after entering, they are contacted by a security guard over the intercom, who directs them to the elevator. They meet up with the security guard, who tells them they won't be able to go any further, as the security system has locked down the hotel. However, the guard will help the group get to the parking garage if they help him first by finding his partner Ken, who was attacked by a mob of zombies. Ken is not in a good way, and after the group gives him some morphine, he dies from his injuries. Making it to the security room, the guard tells the group that parts of the security system are down and will need to be reset before the group will be able to access the garage. The server room is full of infected, and the group has to fight their way through in order to reset the system. Having done so, the group is now able to get into the garage and retrieve the truck. Taking the truck back to the lifeguard tower, Sinamoi tells the group that a helicopter has crashed nearby, and he asks them to check the crash site for survivors and supplies. The only survivor of the crash is a man named Nikolai, who asks the group to help him get to a nearby bunker. Once they have done so, they return to Sinamoi, who sends them out again, this time to take their truck to be upgraded, so that it can better make the trip to the city. Fortunately, there is a mechanic nearby, who has been able to survive so far. Unfortunately, he has been bitten, but he will live long enough to outfit the vehicle, provided the group is able to hold back the dead long enough for him to complete his work. With the truck upgraded, the mechanic asks the group to take his daughter Jin with them, knowing that he only has a few hours left before he turns. After the group agrees to take Jin with them, Sinamoi contacts them again over the radio and tells them it's time to head into the city, urging them not to take any stupid chances. The group, along with Jin, make the trip to the city, which they find to be in an even worse state than the resort. As they arrive, they hear church bells and find a church filled with survivors under siege by the dead. The group eliminates these zombies and enters the church. Speaking with Mother Helen, they are told one of the congregation has been possessed by a demon and locked himself in the belfry. Mother Helen asks the group to enter the belfry and put a stop to the bells which are drawing the dead. The group is able to easily put down the parishioner and switch off the bells. Having done so, they return to Mother Helen, who explains that the city has already been looted, and while she is able to help the group find supplies, she will only do so if they help her first. The church group is having issues with their water supply, and the two people who went to check on the pump station that morning have not returned. Mother Helen asks the group to check on the pump station to see what happened to the missing people, and to turn the water back on. Heading to the pump station, it has been overtaken by a local gang, who shoot at the group on sight. After fighting their way through the gang, the group find the missing people, who are able to get the water supply going, but there are 5 open fire hydrants which are causing significant water loss. The group has to go around and manually close the fire hydrants to prevent this water loss, before heading back to the church. There, Mother Helen is finally ready to assist them with finding supplies. She tells them that the wealthy destroyed the bridge leading to their part of town, not knowing it was actually the work of Ryder White. Fortunately, there is still a way into the wealthy district through the sewer, and one of the church survivors, Joseph, is willing to show the group the way. The group follows Joseph to the sewer maintenance building, and he directs them on how to close the valves and open the floodgates to expel the water from the sewer system. The group is then able to make their way through the sewers until they reach the town hall, where they are greeted by a police officer who is glad to see more survivors. The mayor, however, is less glad to see them, questioning them on how they are able to get into the building before telling them that there isn't any more food or medicine to spare. Walking away from the mayor, the group argues amongst themselves about what to do, with Logan saying they should just find the voice on the radio and get themselves out. With the decision made, the group contacts Jin, who is driving their armoured truck, and they tell her they weren't able to get more supplies and that they are calling it off. Jin is deeply upset about this and says they are meant to help people as they are the only ones who can. Perna attempts to convince Jin that the only way to help anyone is to find the voice on the radio, but Jin insists that they promise to get food and medicine, and she will do it on her own if the others won't help, and she will take the truck with her. Jin wants to supply everyone: the resort, the church, and the police station. The group agrees to supply everyone but the police station, which has been taken over by a local gang. And Perna tells Jin that after the supply run is done, they are tracking down the voice on the radio. Another town hall survivor, who overheard the group talking to the mayor, tells them about a supermarket nearby where they should be able to find supplies. And so, after bribing the policeman guarding the entrance to the sewer, the group makes their way to the supermarket, finding it has also been overtaken by a gang who they need to eliminate in order to secure the supplies. After the group recovers the supplies, they take it to the Old Town Bridge, lowering the crates down to Jin and Joseph to load into the truck. The group then make their way back to Town Hall, but it is immediately apparent that something has gone terribly wrong. The Town Hall survivors have been wiped out, and the building is full of the infected. With nothing they can do, the group heads back to the church, where Mother Helen tells them that Jin has gone to the police station to supply food to the gang there, taking Joseph with her. Mother Helen fears for their safety and asks the group to bring them back. The group only makes it to the steps of the church before finding Joseph, who is severely injured and who has been so overcome by his running with the police station thugs that all the colour has drained out of him. He tells the group that the gang beat him up until he blacked out, and they still have Jin. The group goes to the police station through the sewers, and they find their truck in the parking garage. Making their way into the police station, they find a surviving officer locked in a cell, who explains that the gang took the station when most of the police officers had been out trying to maintain order. The group is able to eliminate the gang in the station and find Jin, who has been traumatized by her experience. Sam B is enraged that Jin lied to them and could have gotten them killed. He wants to leave her with Mother Helen, but the others don't agree, and convince him that they should take her with them and get her off the island. The group stops in at the church before finally heading back to the lifeguard tower to take supplies to Sinamoi and the lifeguard tower survivors. Sinamoi does not have good news for the group. The radio signal was too weak, and while Dominic and a few others went to the hotel to try using the antenna there, they have not heard from them since. The group heads back to the hotel and finds Dominic there with the radio. They are able to make contact with the voice, who tells them that he is on the island prison, and falsely introduces himself as Colonel Ryder White. The voice claims that he went to the prison to get his wife, a doctor who was infected. He also claims he is able to call in a helicopter to evacuate them all if the group gets to him at the prison. He tells the group that there are mines in the water around the prison, and they will need to track down a smuggler named Moen, who will be able to guide them through the mines. Moen is in the jungle, and the voice tells the group that they will be able to reach the jungle via bunkers left by the Japanese. The group heads off to find one of these bunkers and has to blow the door to get in. Once inside, they are able to use the tunnels to get to the jungle without any issues. As they arrive in the jungle, they are contacted by the voice again, who suggests that Moen will want to be taken to the geofarm lab in the jungle. The group confront him on this and suggest that there is another reason he wants them to go to the lab. The voice tells them he hopes that the scientists will be able to create a cure for his wife from their blood, since they are immune to the virus. Jin tells the group that she knows someone that will be able to help them find Moen, and the group heads off to find this person. As the group heads into the jungle, the real Ryder White is making his way through the prison. Upon reaching the prison after being extracted from Moresby, Ryder had found his way through the prison to the hospital wing and found his wife Emily, who is still alive but clearly infected. He is radioed by Kevin, who says he will wait for him in the transformer room and tells him they need to get the power back on. Ryder makes it to Kevin, who he recognizes as the terrorist, Karen. Karen tells Ryder that he can help his wife if Ryder helps him, and he sends Ryder to the basement to turn the generators on to get the power working. Ryder gets the generators going and makes his way back up from the basement, being directed by Karen to head to medical storage to pick up some tetracycline to slow Emily's infection, then administers the tetracycline to Emily. Back on the mainland, the group makes it to the village and speaks with the man in charge, Matatero, who knows where Moen is, and will tell the group if they first recover weapons that had been stolen by a rival group led by Afran. The group makes a harrowing trip through the jungle, coming across the most deadly special infected, the Butcher, before reaching Afran's men. Taking down Afran's men, along with a number of infected, the group is able to recover the weapons and return them to Matatero. Matatero then says that in order to reach Moen, they will need a boat. Conveniently, Afran has a boat, and all the group need to do is fight their way through his camp and eliminate Afran himself to be able to take it. The group then travels by boat to Moen, who claims not to know the way to the prison, but does know how to get to the lab, which Moen says he knows is the source of the outbreak. The group heads to the lab along the river, finding the path up to the lab strewn with bodies and zombies wearing geofarm uniforms. Reaching the lab, they find that there are some survivors remaining, and they are directed to speak with the man in charge, Dr. West. Dr. West preemptively tells the group that the reason for this isolated lab in the middle of the jungle was because they were testing cosmetics on animals and were concerned about animal rights activists. However, the cages in the lab are not exactly animal-shaped. Dr. West has been examining blood samples from infected natives, but the virus mutates too quickly to identify. He wants to take samples from each of the immune to examine their blood, and the group agrees. It will take a few hours to examine the samples, and West asks if the group can help others in the lab in the meantime. The group obliges by helping one scientist, Frank, who has been trapped in a room by the infected, and by obtaining and replacing a fuse for the generator. Once these tasks are complete, the group checks in with Dr. West, who tells them they each have the O-negative blood type, which could be a coincidence, but for some reason the virus doesn't affect their T cells the way it does other people. Within the immune, the virus does not mutate or duplicate, it just dies. Dr. West explains that the virus appears to be a mutated form of Kuru, a prion disease endemic to the region, caused by consuming the brain as part of funerary practices among the indigenous people. Sick natives were brought to the lab by their healthy relatives, and Dr. West wonders if the natives who did not contract the virus have antibodies in their blood. Dr. West asks the group to go to the native camp and ask for a blood sample. The group obliges and finds the native leader, Karatoa Ope, and one warrior in a cave. Ope tells the group that they need to prove themselves against the greatest warriors of his tribe. The group enters the tribe's arena, and the warriors they are fighting are all zombies, including the greatest warrior of the tribe, from whom the group is permitted to take a blood sample. Based on the doctor's comments about wanting to find out if the healthy natives had antibodies, it did not seem like the doctor wanted a sample from the infected, which they would have had from the infected that were brought to the lab, but apparently this is fine, and the group is asked to help out more around the lab. The group obliges once more, this time obtaining more chemicals for one scientist, and obtaining infected muscle samples for another, before returning to Dr. West. Dr. West needs a stable sample of Kuru from a member of Ope's tribe who has not had contact with any of the infected. After agreeing to try to find such a sample, the group is contacted by the voice and told that the tribe embalms their dead, so they would be able to obtain a sample from any of the tribe's dead. The group goes to speak with Ope, who tells them that every member of his tribe ate the flesh of the immortals, but many did not resurrect. He thinks this means that the spirits are angry with them. Ope tells the group that the only warriors remaining are in the tomb of their ancestors. He offers to take the group to the tomb, which is near his village. The group escort Ope to the boat and travel along the river near to Ope's village. They then escort him through the village, which is overrun by the zombified members of his tribe, and up through the mountains to the tombs. Upon entering the tomb, the group and Ope come across a young woman, Yerima, Ope's daughter, lying on the ground. Ope says she is a very bad spirit and attempts to kill her. He is stopped by Perna, who shoots him dead. The group check on Yerima and ask if she ate any of the zombies, or immortals as Ope called them. She confirmed that she had to, that all of the members of her tribe were made to eat them, believing that if they did, they would live forever. The group resolved to take Yerima with them, and after obtaining the sample from one of the mummies there, they head back to the boat with Yerima. They go through the village where they find Moen surrounded by the dead, and after they rescue him, they head back along the river to the lab. At the lab, Dr. West says the sample may work, and he also wants to run some tests on Yerima to see if she is infected, but this will take some time. The voice from the prison contacts them again, becoming more impatient, and insisting that Moen does know the way to the prison, despite his claims not to. Returning to the boat, Moen confirms that he does actually know how to get to the prison, and that it is dangerous, so he doesn't like to go, but since the group saved his life, he is willing to take them. However, before they're able to go to the prison, they will need to obtain some more fuel for the boat, and also to pick up something for one of the prisoners, Titus, so he will let them through. The group heads into Moresby to obtain fuel from the petrol station, and to pick up Moen's stash from a shipping container. Once this is done, Moen says that due to the choppy water conditions, they will also need to make some modifications to the boat to prevent them from accidentally hitting one of the mines surrounding the prison. He directs the group to return to the workshop at the beach that had been run by Jin's father. The group complies and they obtain some metal rods, but when they bring them back to the boat, Jin says there's something she needs to do, and tells them to wait for her. Jin heads into her father's workshop and finds that he is still there, but has succumbed to the infection. She puts him down and returns to the others. At the prison, Ryder heads to the central control room where Charon, aka the Voice, is talking to Dr. West via video link. Dr. West is reporting that he has successfully created a supervirus from Yerema's blood, just like Karen requested. Dr. West tells Karen that Yerema's blood contained the virus in a pristine form, and he believes she is the source of the plague. Dr. West doesn't know where the virus came from, but he tells Karen that he wishes to study it, to try to create a vaccine. Karen immediately tells him no, and directs him to send the virus to him, along with the immune survivors and Yerema. Dr. West tells him that he can have the virus, but Yerema is staying with him. Yerema then refuses to allow West to take more of her blood, and locks herself in a cage. West goes to open the cage using his computer, and Karen takes this opportunity to open the cages holding the infected, killing West and the other scientists. Pretending to be Colonel White once more, Karen directs the immune survivors to return to the lab immediately. Back on the mainland, the group receives Karen's message about the labs, still believing the voice they are hearing is Colonel White's. At the prison, Ryder overheard at least the end of this conversation, and interrogates Karen on who he was talking to. Karen tells Ryder not to be paranoid, and says he can still help him. Karen then directs Ryder to wipe out the infected in cell block C, and the showers, to ensure the path is clear for the immune survivors. Ryder does so, wiping out the guards and zombies from cell block C and the shower block, before using the utility tunnels to return to the control room. Meanwhile, the group has returned to the lab, and found all the scientists have been killed. They free Yerema from the cage, and she tells them that Dr. West had wanted to take more and more blood from her, but she knew a person could only lose so much blood, so she locked herself in a cage to get away from him. Yerema, not knowing of Karen's involvement, believed it was Dr. West who accidentally unlocked the cages holding the infected while trying to open her cage. Karen radios the group, saying that Dr. West had said he knew how to make the vaccine, and asks them to look for it. They find a syringe they believe to be the antidote and head to the prison, navigating the minefield while Karen tells them not to trust the prisoners. After clearing cell block C in the showers, Ryder is making his way back to the control room when he overhears this conversation between the immune and Karen. He confronts Karen, who claims he was pretending to be Ryder so the immune would trust him. He tells Ryder the immune are bringing an antidote for the virus. Karen then directs Ryder to set up a gas trap for the immune at the elevator. Ryder obtains the knockout gas and sets the trap. At the prison, Moen speaks with the leader of the prisoners, Titus, giving him the cigars he had stashed for him. Titus tells Moen that what he really needs are guns, and Moen tells Titus that they have something better than guns. They have people immune to the virus. Moen thinks maybe Titus and the immune can help each other out. Titus agrees to this and asks the group to release a prisoner who is still locked in his cell in cell block A, solitary. The group heads off to recover this prisoner, cutting down numerous zombie prisoners on the way. They find the prisoner in a cell full of bunk beds, which I guess is this prison's definition of solitary. They free the prisoner from his cell and escort him back to Titus. Titus is now willing to help the immune get to cell block C, provided they get the prisoners some weapons from the armory. When they get to the armory, they find Karen, who introduces himself as Kevin, and claims to be sent by Titus to help them get into the armory. Karen says they need a master key card to get into the armory, and only senior guards have these keys. The immune are able to find a master key card and return to Karen, who opens the door for them. The immune then take what's left in the armory and return to Titus. Titus is disappointed with the amount of weaponry the immune were able to recover, but the more pressing concern for now is food, as the kitchen has been overrun with the infected, and the prisoners are getting hungry. The group exterminates the infected in the kitchen and returns to Titus once more, who has decided it's now time to deal with the weapon shortage, and tells the group to head to cell block B, where the guards should have more weapons. The group does go to cell block B, however while they are there they are contacted by Karen, who, still pretending to be Colonel White, urges them not to get weapons for the prisoners, and telling them instead to come straight to him via the sewers. Karen says that he will take care of Jin, Moen and Yerema. Without any hesitation, the group abandons their quest to obtain weapons, and instead heads for the sewers, emerging into the shower room that had previously been cleared by Ryder. Making their way towards Karen, the group runs into Jin and Yerema, who explains that a mob of prisoners had attacked Titus and his men. The dead were drawn by the noise, and Moen got the girls out of there, getting them into the vents before the dead attacked him and tore him apart. The group, along with Yerema and Jin, head to the elevators, where they fall victim to the trap set by Ryder. Ryder and Karen watch the group via CCTV as they lose consciousness. Karen says they can now get the cure, but Ryder pulls a gun on him, locking him in the control center before going to get the cure off the immune. Karen tells him the cure won't work, as Emily is no longer in the first stage of infection. Ryder heads off to try to save Emily, and once he is gone, Charon uses a keycard to let himself out of the control center. Ryder goes to the elevator and takes the syringe off the immune, taking it to Emily in the hospital ward. Unfortunately, Emily has succumbed to the infection. Ryder tells Emily they can't give up, and suggests that maybe an antidote can be made from the vaccine. He takes Emily to the helicopter in the hope of evacuating her and finding scientists who are able to cure the virus. As Ryder is taking Emily to the roof, the group is waking up to Charon telling them that Ryder has taken the vaccine and gone to the helicopter. He tells them that Ryder is going to order the thermonuclear bombing of the island and that they need to hurry. Charon explains that Ryder is going to go the long way to the roof as he will be collecting his wife from the hospital ward, and suggests that the immune should take the elevator to the roof. It will be dangerous, so he, Yerima and Jin will go the longer way and meet the immune at the helicopter. The group splits up and the immune make their way to the roof, finding themselves greeted on the roof by members of the Benoi Island Defense Force, determined not to let them reach the helicopter. As the immune fight their way to the helicopter, Ryder contacts the base and orders Protocol 66 be executed. This is the signal for the Benoi Island Defense Force to bomb the island to eliminate the virus. The immune finally fight their way past the soldiers and a number of infected to meet Ryder at the helicopter. Charon, Yerima and Jin arrive at the same time, and there is a tense standoff between the group and Ryder. Logan attempts to reason with Ryder, telling him his wife is gone, but he can still save them. Ryder says that the doctors in Sydney will be able to make more vaccine, and he will send helicopters to save everyone. Perna tells Ryder that Charon had told them about the nuclear bomb. Ryder says he had no choice, and the virus threatens the entire world. Benoi is lost either way. Jin comments to Ryder on how easy it must be to kill faceless nobodies, but it's harder to kill someone you love. Jin releases the zombified Emily, who immediately bites Ryder. He puts her down and shoots Jin twice in retaliation, killing her and sending her flying off the roof. Ryder, still believing the syringe she has contains a vaccine effective in the early stages of infection, injects himself. However, as this was actually the supervirus ordered by Charon, it causes Ryder to immediately transform into a mutated zombie, who the immune have to put down. They do so, and the immune, along with Yerima and Charon, who they still believe is just some guy named Kevin, are able to leave the island in the helicopter before the island is bombed. The immune survivors from Benoi, along with Charon and Yerima, land on the Australian Navy vessel the HMAS Avenger. As the group gets off the helicopter, they are taken into custody by command of Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Hardy, who is quickly joined by Frank Serpo. Like Charon, Serpo is a member of the consortium. He was in charge of overseeing the Palanai experiment. Serpo orders the immune to the lab, and for Yerima and Charon to go with him. The group struggle against their captors, and Yerima bites the man holding her before she is recaptured by the geopharm scientist accompanying Serpo. Hardy tries to intervene in Serpo's treatment of the group, but is told that his orders are to follow Serpo's orders. Hardy backs down and indicates to his men to follow Serpo's instructions. The immune are examined by the geopharm scientist, while Yerima is removed to a separate facility. Charon is also taken off the ship to be moved to another consortium facility for debriefing, as it is suspected his goals are not really aligned with the consortium. After the immune are tested, they are moved to a cell where they awaken to see John Morgan in the room with them. During the events of Dead Island, a similar outbreak is occurring on the island of Palanai, another island within the Benoi archipelago. John Morgan is a sergeant with the Australian Defence Force, who was part of the 2nd Battalion deployed to Palanai. They were sent to a remote village to enforce a quarantine, but eventually ordered to abandon the village, and ordered to eliminate any surviving villagers, though John refused to issue this order to his men. After leaving the village, John was bitten by an infected, but did not turn. He went to Henderson to check on his family, who had already left, to attempt to flee to Australia. John then went to the Henderson military base, where he was detained and transported to the HMAS Avenger, just prior to the arrival of the immune survivors from Benoi. The survivors question him on his presence, but they see that he has been bitten, and realize that he is immune just like them. After a brief discussion, the group lose consciousness again, due to the drugs the scientists had given them. The next time they awake, the ship is in jeopardy. Lieutenant Colonel Hardy makes an announcement over the PA system that the ship has been compromised, and he has opened all of the cell doors. The immune leave the cell, quickly realizing that there has been an outbreak on the ship. To add to the ship's problems, the engines have caught fire, and the immune have to turn off the gas flow to prevent the engines exploding. The ship is also taking on water, and the immune have to make their way through the rising water and numerous infected in order to reach the ship's deck. The situation up top is not much better, and the immune have to fight their way to Hardy. As soon as they reach him, the ship strikes a rock, and Hardy realizes they are on a collision course. A group of infected is also on their way towards them. Once the area is secure, the immune and Hardy head for the bridge, and have to take out the zombified ship's captain before Hardy attempts to gain control of the vessel. Unfortunately, it is too late, and the ship crashes. The immune survivors are knocked unconscious, and when they come to, they find themselves lying on the beach of Palanai, with a woman named Harlow telling them the beach isn't safe due to a plague spreading on the island. She directs them to go to the Paradise Survival Camp. The immune make their way to the camp and find it is under attack from the dead. They help defend the camp, and once the dead are disposed of, the immune assist with setting up fences to keep the infected out. After another horde attacks, the immune also blow the bridge into the camp to ensure no more can enter that way. Once the camp is as secure as it can be, Harlow arrives with Lieutenant Colonel Hardy in tow. The immune are not happy to see him, but he tells them that he knows the commanding officer at the military base in Henderson. He tells the group that the base has food, water, weapons, and a way off the island. He also tells them that the island is about to be nuked. The immune agree to head to Henderson, and this means finding a boat. Harlow suggests going to the fishing village of Halai, as they should have some boats there. The immune do go to Halai, but are told that all the boats are gone, though there may still be some at the marina. The marina is overrun with the dead, but sure enough the immune are able to find a boat there that they are able to use once they replace the engine. They then make their way through the jungle by boat to reach the road to Henderson, but unfortunately it has been cut off. Returning to Halai, they are told that a missionary, Marcus Villa, may know another way to reach the city. The immune track down Villa, who, in exchange for the immune finding some equipment for him, tells them that there are Japanese bunkers and tunnels that they will be able to use to get to the highway that leads to Henderson. Villa sends the immune to his house to find a map of the island with an entrance to the tunnels. The immune are prevented from entering the house by a local man who demands the immune find malaria medicine in exchange for being allowed into the house. The immune find some bark that has similar medicinal purposes and are allowed entry. The map they were sent to find turns out to be nothing more than scribbles about the jungle. Returning to Halai, they are told that Villa has gone to the Paradise Survival Camp and is talking about doing a ritual. They find Villa at the camp, yelling for the immune to come forward to be sacrificed as a cure for the plague. Villa sets the camp on fire, and the noise attracts the infected. The immune are forced to defend the camp until Harlow arrives, and they are able to evacuate to Halai. At Halai, the immune and Harlow look over the map, noting that the two entrances to the tunnels are in flooded areas and are inaccessible. John Morgan suggests going to see the scientist Villa worked with, Dr. Kessler. Harlow agrees this is a good idea, and that he will know more about the tunnels. At Dr. Kessler's facility, the scientist tasks the immune with collecting reagents from infected scientists. And once this is done, he convinces the immune to allow him to test their blood as well. He then tells them that the immune's resistance to the virus has not destroyed the virus, but just suppressed it. He warns them that any exposure to mutagens could cause them to lose their immunity, or much worse, and this includes the chemicals that they will find in the Japanese tunnels. Dr. Kessler gives the immune a better map, and they head off to the Santa Maria mission to find one of the entrances to the tunnels. Upon reaching the mission, they find the tunnel is flooded, but they call the rest of the survivors to join them. The other survivors make their way via the marina, but one falls behind. He is bitten by an infected and hides it from the group. The immune find a pump from the marina, and after putting up some defences, switch the pump on to clear the tunnel. The noise again draws the infected, and the immune defend the mission until the water is cleared. The tunnels are filled with the infected and smugglers, and the immune clear the way before calling the rest of the survivors to come through. As the survivors make it out of the tunnel, the one that was bitten, Wayne, says that he was pushed into the chemicals in the tunnel. He mutates into a wrestler, a large and dangerous infected. Harlow admits that she pushed him. She knew he had been infected, and claims she needed to see the impact of the mutagen on someone who had been infected. The immune then have to put Wayne down so the group can reach the ferry terminal. The terminal is occupied by convicts, and while the immune attempt to negotiate with them to gain access to the ferry, this is unsuccessful and the convicts attack. The immune is overcome by fury, caused by the exposure to the chemicals, and after the convicts are eliminated, they contact Dr. Kessler in a panic, trying to find out what is happening to them. But the doctor is of little help, just saying they need to limit their exposure to the mutagen from now on. The Immune find a ferry worker who is able to call the ferry, and the Immune and the other survivors have to hold off the infected until the ferry arrives. Using the ferry, the group is able to reach Henderson, with the Immune first clearing out the surrounding area of the infected, before the ferry worker suggests they head for an old movie theatre. Following this advice, they head into Henderson and make their way to the movie theatre. They clear it of the infected and speak with the owner, who tells them to lower the security shutters to secure the theatre. Once the theatre is secured, the rest of the survivors join the Immune, and Hardy tells them that they will need to go to the military base. Hardy is friends with Commander Briggs and believes that he is the way off the island. The Immune do go to the base, but they find it to be overrun. They make it to the communications room and try to contact Briggs, but instead it is Frank Serpo who answers. Serpo initially refuses to help, but once he recognizes the Immune from the HMAS Avenger, he says he will send them a helicopter. He also tells them that Hardy was lying about the island being nuked. Returning to the theatre, the Immune confront Hardy, who admits he told them that there was a nuke in order to get them to move and get them off the island. He also warns them that Serpo only wants the Immune and isn't coming to get anyone else. Hardy suggests taking the helicopter from Serpo. The group agrees to burn rolls of film on the roof to tell Serpo where they are. The Immune also head to a nearby soundstage to create a diversion. Serpo sees the fire and arrives in the helicopter with soldiers. Following Serpo's orders, the soldiers direct the Immune to board the helicopter first, but Hardy tries to board in order to prevent the helicopter from taking only the Immune. Hardy is then shot by a soldier, and in retaliation, Logan fires a missile at the helicopter, which loses control. The commotion causes the infected to rush the roof, and the Immune have to hold them off. Once the horde has been eliminated, the Immune go to the side of the helicopter crash at the old fort to see if it can be salvaged. Finding the helicopter destroyed, the Immune follow a trail of blood to the pilot, who says Serpo shot the other pilot to distract the infected while he got away. Continuing to search the fort, the Immune finds Serpo, who tells them that Harlow has gone to the quarantine zone and has been stealing data and planning to sell the virus and vaccine to the highest bidder. Serpo also mentions that Harlow was going to take a boat off the island from the quarantine zone. The Immune go into the quarantine zone after Harlow, making their way to the docks. They find Harlow in a lab. She is ranting about the outbreak on Palanite being an experiment to test bioweapons, and how the mutagen will destroy them. She explains that the scientists caught her sneaking into the facility. They tested the mutagen on her, not knowing she was immune, and not knowing that she would kill them all. Harlow believes that the Immune will not be able to control themselves in the end, and that they are all too dangerous to leave the island. Harlow attacks the Immune to try and prevent them from leaving. The Immune fight back and ultimately inject themselves with the mutagen in order to be able to beat her. Once Harlow is dead, the Immune find the boat. Serpo arrives as they are about to leave. He confirms that Palanite was a test for the virus, to see how it mutates and evolves, and whether it can be controlled. Serpo says he knows the Immune took the mutagen, and that if they want any chance of a normal life, they need to go with him for treatment. Instead, the Immune board the boat and leave Serpo behind to become part of his experiment. They pick up the remnants of the Paradise Survival Camp survivors and make for open water. 6 days later, the boat washes up on the coast of a distant island. There is no sign of life on deck, and there are only sounds of gurgling from below. The fate of the Immune and the other survivors is left ambiguous. 6 months after the outbreak on Benoi, Cliff Kalo, along with his friends Linda and Devon, are sailing to the Benoi archipelago to investigate the rumours of a zombie outbreak on Benoi. The radio announcer is heard stating that Benoi is off limits due to unstable harbour conditions. Cliff's father is the media mogul Tom Kalo, and the three believe that if they uncover the truth about the outbreak, then Tom will publish the story worldwide. Cliff stands on the bow of the boat, looking out into the distance. When he is called over by his friends, he expresses that he was having a moment of déjà vu. This will be more meaningful at the end of his story. As the boat approaches the island, Linda wonders why no one is yelling at them to go back, and Devon explains that this is because they are not going to Benoi, they are going to Narapella, the island with the geopharm lab, which Kilo 2 infiltrated at the start of the outbreak. Reaching the beach, Linda moves off to scout some filming locations. After she is gone, Cliff thinks that he hears her say, "so many bodies," but it couldn't have been her. Cliff goes off to find Linda next to a shipping container with the geopharm logo on it. with Linda noting that Cliff was right about Geofarm being on Narapella. Cliff takes a few photographs as evidence of Geofarm's presence before hearing a horn in the distance and seeing an explosion by the boat, which starts sinking. Cliff runs back down the beach, jumping into the water and swimming to the boat, but as he pulls himself onto the deck, the sail swings around and hits him, knocking him unconscious and throwing him into the sea. He wakes up in a shipping container on Narapella, but Linda and Devon are nowhere to be found. He makes his way towards the marina, but comes across his first zombie. Weaponless for now, Cliff has to sneak around the zombie, finding a rope that allows him to lower himself down to the marina. Entering the marina, Cliff comes across a staff office with phones that ring as he gets close to them. He hears ominous messages over the phones, which we will come back to a bit later. Exiting the building via the garbage chute, Cliff makes his way back to the beach and sees shipping containers falling from the sky, one of which lands directly on top of him. Cliff awakes in a shipping container once more, but this time Linda comes to check on him. Before speaking with Linda, Cliff picks up a makeshift club, which unlocks the achievement Blunt Trauma, and this ties in with one of the theories about what's happening in this story. Linda explains that she fished Cliff out of the water, and it appears Cliff's excursion to the marina was a dream, but he still has the rope he acquired, and the locations he went to in his dream are real and will look the same as when we go back there later in the game. Cliff finds Devon by a deserted shack and uses his club to break the wooden planks barricading the entrance. The back of the hut leads to the jungle, and the trio head off, still chasing their story. They soon come across piles of bodies, and Cliff takes photographs of the scene. The three then make for the mountaintop to survey the situation on the island. Looking out over their surrounds, the trio decide to head for the village to continue their investigations, though Devon would have preferred to go to the marina first to look for another boat. Before they leave the mountaintop, Cliff finds a radio on the picnic table and hears a broadcast from a woman, but she cannot hear him. Heading back down the mountain, the group reaches the piles of bodies again, but this time some of the dead have reanimated, and Cliff is forced to eliminate them. Linda is then attacked by a special zombie, a bouncer, and though Cliff is able to kill it as well, Linda has been bitten and is now infected. As Linda lies on the ground, a plane passes overhead, before crashing not too far away. Cliff tells Devon to take Linda back up the mountain where it is safe while he investigates the crash. At the airfield, Cliff finds the downed plane with Xian Mei within it. He fends off the undead that have been drawn by the noise, and Xian gives him a gun, asking him to hold off the dead while she turns off the alarm. She then tells him that he should leave the island, but Cliff replies that he can't, as Linda has been attacked. Xian tells Cliff that there are research labs on the island, and if there is a cure, that is where it will be. But he won't be able to get in without the master keycard, which is in turn locked in a room opened by 3 keycards that they won't be able to locate unless the power surge in the staff village is resolved. Cliff heads to the staff village, speaking with Linda over the radio on the way and reassuring her that everything will be okay. He is able to resolve the power surge in the village, allowing the keycards to be located. One is in a nearby hangar, one is at the helipad, and one is near Emery's villa. The hangar keycard is easy to obtain, though guarded by a spitter. The one at the villa is guarded by a screamer, who is tough to kill and alerts other infected to any nearby threat. Upon taking the villa keycard, Cliff hallucinates that he is in the Geofarm labs. The helipad is also guarded by a tough enemy, a butcher, and upon retrieving this keycard, Cliff again hallucinates, this time that he is in the lab's greenhouse. Returning to the security room with the 3 keycards, Cliff is able to access the room with a master keycard. In this room, Cliff also believes he hears his father making the announcement that Cliff's sister, Alexis, is being made VP of Broadcasting. Cliff's father expresses his admiration for Alexis, who is nothing like Cliff, who prefers to spend his time drinking with friends. Cliff passes out, grabbing his head, and awakes in the room on the mountaintop. He is confronted by Devon, who tells him Linda is missing, and accuses Cliff of chasing a story while Linda was dying. Cliff becomes angry, insisting that he is helping Linda, and that he was talking to her the whole time on the radio. Devon tells Cliff that they don't have a radio. Devon wants to go to the marina to find a way off the island, but Cliff insists on going to the Geofarm lab to find a cure for Linda. The two split ways, with Devon heading to the marina, while Cliff heads to the lab. On the way, he imagines seeing a train sticking out of the mountain. Making it to the lab, Cliff uses the keycard to open the door and is promptly met by a group of zombies who are shot by Xian. She leaves Cliff a shotgun before entering the lab ahead of him. Cliff makes his way through the lab, coming across what is apparently the body of Kilo 2. Xian then tells Cliff about the data Kilo 2 had stashed, and Cliff goes to find it. When he does, he contacts Linda, proclaiming that this is what they need, and that he is coming to get her. Cliff heads off to look for Linda and the cure, and on the way hallucinates a train coming down the hall towards him. Narrowly avoiding the train, Cliff makes it to Dr. Aaron Wells' lab, where a mutated Dr. Wells and Dr. Faith Kimball stand over Linda. Cliff bursts into the room, shooting Dr. Wells, demanding to know what they have done to Linda. Dr. Wells lunges for Cliff and chases him out through the greenhouse. Cliff flings himself through a window and plummets down to earth towards the mountaintop, waking up again in the mountaintop room. He says to himself that Linda is dead, but Linda replies saying she doesn't think this is a reason for Cliff not to talk to her. Cliff makes his way through the jungle to the marina to find Devon, and is temporarily contacted by Dr. Kimball, though she is cut off, and Cliff questions himself as to whether that conversation really happened. Reaching the marina, Cliff heads to the pier and hallucinates again, fighting his way out to the boat on platforms that rise up in front of him. As he reaches the boat, Cliff again clutches his head and passes out, coming to back on the pier by the partly submerged boat. Cliff decides Devon must still be on the island, and is about to go look for him, when his father flies overhead in a helicopter, telling Cliff to go to the helipad. Cliff obliges his father and heads across the beach, seeing an infinite number of shipping containers falling from the sky, some of which land on the beach, and Cliff has to make his way through them. Reaching the helipad, Cliff's father tells him to get on as they don't have much time. Cliff tells his dad that he can't leave the island without Devon. Tom then tells him to hand over the data Cliff found, prompting Cliff to realize that his father came to Narapella for the story, not him. Cliff refuses to hand over the data, and Tom and the helicopter fly off. After defeating some zombies that were drawn by the helicopter, Cliff hears Linda's voice again and clutches his head, finding himself on a different looking helipad in the jungle. Venturing forth, Cliff finds a zombified Linda, who he is forced to take out, along with some shadow zombies. Cliff then awakes in the mountaintop room once more, and is relieved it is a dream until he goes outside and finds a memorial to Linda, with Devon's drawings upon it. Cliff is contacted by Shine once more, and she warns him that the island is rigged to blow and he needs to leave now. Cliff is also contacted by Dr. Kimball, who tells him instead to come to the villa, and says that she can help him get Devon back, if Cliff agrees to help her out as well. Cliff goes to the villa, but continues to be plagued with hallucinations. There are more shadow zombies throughout the villa, along with the mutated Dr. Wells, who pursues Cliff until falling through the floor. Cliff makes it to Emery Crown's office, where Dr. Kimball tells him that she finished the serum, and Cliff must take it for everyone's sake. Dr. Kimball then releases an infected Devon, who bites Cliff. Cliff picks up the serum but does not inject himself, before finding himself somewhere else on the island. He sees Devon and Linda in front of him, and makes his way towards them, before being attacked by shadow zombies as they watch. In a recreation of the scene near the start of the game, Linda is attacked and bitten, but this time it is by a zombified Cliff, who the human Cliff has to take down, as Linda and Devon disappear. Cliff continues on as the voices urge him to take the serum. He finds himself in a crystalline landscape, continuing to fight through shadow zombies, or being told that it's just a dream, it's a lie, and there is no escape. He sees Xian, who tells him he knows they won't let the secret leave the island, and while Cliff's fate is sealed, he can still help them find a cure. Cliff also sees Devon, who tells Cliff the scientists have them all hooked up to IVs, and are dissecting them like lab rats. Devon begs Cliff to wake up and save them. Cliff then sees Dr. Wells, who tells Cliff not to take what Faith is offering, before seeing Dr. Kimball herself, who is talking to someone on the screens, telling them that she has spent years developing the antiviral, and it will at least buy him some time. At the end of the crystal path, Cliff sees the zombified Linda again, and eliminates her once more, before having to fight off wave after wave of zombies, or being confronted by Linda, who tells Cliff he is selfish, Dr. Kimball, who urges Cliff to take the serum, Dr. Wells, who tells Cliff he is in a coma, and won't wake up after that blow to his head, and Devon, who suggests Cliff is crazy, and this is all in his head. Defeating the last of the zombies, Cliff kneels down next to Devon's body and the serum, seeming to finally inject himself with the serum, though this is left ambiguous. Cliff is then on the beach with the container containing the data and all of the information he has gathered, while behind him the villa explodes. Cliff takes the container to the edge of the water and records a message to whoever may find it, confirming that the outbreak on Benoi was caused by Geopharm's experiments on Narapella. Cliff pushes the container out to sea before hearing Linda's voice calling to him, and he is seen walking back towards it. The container floats out to sea before being struck by a boat, taking Cliff, Linda and Devon to Narapella. Cliff stands in the bow of the boat looking out into the distance. When he is called over by his friends, he expresses that he was having a moment of deja vu. Everything is just as it was at the start of the game, only Cliff's clothes are already torn, and he is already injured, though he seems not to notice. There is also now a katana below deck. Cliff is now free to recommence his adventure on Narapella with minor changes. This time after being knocked unconscious by the boat, Cliff awakes in his room and goes outside to follow a mysterious figure before being attacked from behind and bitten by a zombie. He then wakes up again in the same shipping container as the first playthrough. The phones in the staff office now tell Cliff that he is dreaming and he needs to wake up, with one voice instead calling for more sedative as he is waking up. At some point during Cliff's adventure on Narapella, he entered Ronald Crown's underwater lab facility. This facility is part of the Underwater Labs DLC, and it can be entered at almost any point during the game. It is here that Cliff can uncover the history of Geopharm, Ronald Crown and Chase Barrister's involvement in the development of HKEA, and the eventual overthrow of Ronald by his son Emery on behalf of the Palm Garden Order. Here Cliff is also confronted by the most dangerous zombie on Narapella, the Dweller. He is almost entirely blind but has exceptional hearing and is both incredibly difficult to kill in a direct fight and difficult to sneak up on. Cliff continues his hallucinations here, imagining first that water is flooding in, and later that the cable car he rides in drops to the bottom of the sea. After exploring the lab, Cliff is able to leave it by activating the evacuation protocol and going through the most challenging battle he will face on Narapella, as he is swarmed by all types of zombies other than the Dweller, and has to hold them off until the water level rises high enough to electrocute all of the remaining zombies. Given Cliff's frequent hallucinations and the comments made by other characters in the game, along with the apparent time loop Cliff is trapped in, it appears that Cliff most likely was knocked unconscious by the boat and has been in a coma since then. It is also likely that he, Devon and Linda have found themselves being experimented on by Geopharm. A Geopharm file also notes that a patient with the initials CC was brought in with extreme dehydration and is semi-conscious but suffering a serious concussion caused by some kind of blunt force trauma. This means that most of what Cliff saw may not be canon to the story of Dead Island, but Kilo 2's experience in the prologue is not impacted by Cliff being unreliable, so it's likely that parts of the story that Kilo 2 uncovered are real, with Geopharm and the Palm Garden Order being the source of the outbreak, along with Karen's involvement and the consortium. Following the events of Dead Island, the lifeguard John Sinnamoy was able to escape Benoi prior to the nuclear bombing. He made it to another island in the archipelago called Amaya. Unfortunately, the disease had found its way to this island as well. Sinnamoy comes across another group of survivors who are infected with the disease, but are not turned into mindless zombies. Instead, the disease turns them into superhumans, both stronger and smarter than before, and Sinnamoy chooses to stay with these survivors. These events take place during the multiplayer online battle arena game, Dead Island Epidemic. It was cancelled in October of 2015, with the servers being shut down. Dead Island Survivors is another cancelled installment in the series. It was a tower defense mobile game following Dead Island Riptide, in which Xian Mei and Sam B travel between islands assisting other survivors. It was shut down in 2020. At some point following Dead Island Riptide, Max is living in California with his cat, Rick Furry. Max falls asleep playing a zombie video game, and he dreams that Rick Furry has been catnapped. He fights his way through zombies, criminals, and soldiers to retrieve his cat. He then awakes in his home to find that Rick Furry is sleeping safe and sound next to him. However, their home is surrounded by a zombie horde, which is getting closer. With the events in the Benoi archipelago having been successfully covered up, Escarton have been free to continue their work. The experiments on Benoi, Narapella, and Palanai have given Ascarton the answer they were seeking. They now know that the result of the clock hitting 0 in human DNA is their transition from human to zombie, or as they call it, the autophage. For about 15 years following the events in the archipelago, Ascarton has been successful in hiding their activities. Experiments into the creation of a virus and other methods of triggering zombification are occurring in Los Angeles. These experiments were conducted directly by Ascarton and headed by Dr. Reuben Reed. There are, however, some others who are aware of Ascarton's activities. Lola Conrad, the CEO of technology company OSK, met Dr. Reed, and from him learned about the autophage. She created an artificial intelligence called Constantine to predict any outbreaks of the autophage and went on to create Haus, a cult governed by this AI which was designed to save humanity by uploading the conscious minds of people into an ark. Like in all post-apocalyptic cults, Constantine went a bit weird with it, subjecting candidates to a number of different rites and challenges to determine who would be accepted. Constantine unfortunately was off in his predictions of when the autophage outbreak would occur, and a number of candidates for the Ark were lost to the autophage. With the Ark endangered by the infiltration of the autophage into Haus, Constantine calculated that there was only one person who could save the Ark. This person was fleeing LA, unaware of their importance, and so Constantine sent 2 of his chosen to find them. With LA quickly devolving into Hell A, the military are evacuating survivors. The last flight out is taking those who have been fortunate enough to secure passes. One actor, Robert Steele, does not have a pass, and instead bribes his way onto the flight. He also pays for his wife, Emma Jaunt, and her assistant Michael to be allowed on the plane. Unfortunately, Robert was infected before boarding, and turned shortly after takeoff, causing the military to shoot the plane down, rather than allow the infection to escape LA. The Slayer survives the wreck and makes their way out of the plane. They find a group of survivors, Emma Jaunt and her assistant Michael, and another passenger, Ronnie, outside. The Slayer hears a noise coming from under some debris and discovers Joshua, with his legs pinned under some wreckage. Angelina was also buried by debris and is unconscious. The Slayer, Ronnie and Michael attempt to move the piece of wreckage from Joshua's legs, but are unable to lift it. As they try, they hear the sounds of zombies approaching, and Michael convinces Emma that they have to go. Emma agrees, but writes her address on the Slayer's arm before leaving with Michael and Ronnie. The Slayer stays to protect Joshua and Angelina. They see what appears to be another survivor, but when they approach they find it is a zombie, with more quickly appearing. The Slayer is able to eliminate the zombies before checking on Joshua and Angelina. Angelina appears to be waking up, so the Slayer tries to give her some water, but she has turned and bites them on the arm, before turning on Joshua. The Slayer is forced to put down Angelina and Joshua, who had succumbed to the infection within moments of being attacked. The Slayer decides to make their way to Emma's house, but the infection in their veins makes their hearing dim, and their vision come and go with a red tinge as they make their way towards the city. They eventually pass out, and when they come to, find they are lying on the ground in Bel Air. They find a map and are able to make their way to Emma's mansion. They are still feeling the effects of the infection, and by the time they make it through the doors, they are barely able to stay on their feet. They show Michael the bite, and he raises a gun at them before it is taken by Emma's housekeeper, Andrea, who tells the Slayer to leave. Emma comes over and struggles with Andrea over the gun before the Slayer takes it off them and hands it to Emma. The Slayer says they need to lie down, and Michael tells Emma the Slayer had been bitten, prompting a panicked discussion between Emma, Michael and Andrea over what to do as the Slayer passes out. When they come around again, they are handcuffed to gym equipment, with Emma sitting nearby with the gun. While the Slayer appears to be better now, Emma is unwilling to uncuff them, until Michael runs in and says zombies are surrounding the house and trying to get in. The Slayer offers to help, and Emma tells them that the cuffs are actually just toys, and to press the button to be released. One would have thought Ryan at least would be able to recognize fake handcuffs, but I guess he's had a lot on his mind. The Slayer goes outside and finds the gate is open. They replace the circuit breaker and fight off the zombies until the gate closes. Heading back inside, they see Michael and Emma talking, before they all hear noises coming from the next room. The Slayer prepares to fight off more zombies, but instead finds Sam B on the other side of the door. He has come to get Emma out of LA, though she is not glad to see him. Apparently she hasn't heard from him since he went to the store 15 years ago. Sam B tells the group that he's been through this before and that he is immune. Emma says, "Big deal, so is the Slayer." The Slayer talks to Sam B, telling him that if they are immune, they need to tell the authorities. Sam B, though, has no desire to report his immune state and risk being dissected by scientists looking for answers, so he refuses. The Slayer resolves to go by themselves. They ask Emma where the nearest evacuation point was, and she tells him it was at the Halperin Hotel. Michael lets the Slayer out the back door, and they make their way to the military evacuation center at the hotel. Unfortunately, it had been overrun, and the Slayer heads into the hotel to look for any survivors. Inside, the lobby has been overrun by zombies, but they hear a voice coming through a radio in the ballroom. The voice over the radio is that of Dr. Reuben Reed, who is broadcasting a message to any survivors to make their way to the Sterling Hotel in Santa Monica, offering shelter and medical facilities to anyone who can make their way there. The Slayer decides they will use the radio to contact the authorities. Unfortunately, the door to the ballroom is locked, but while they are there they hear Major J.S. Booker over the hotel intercom goading someone into coming to get her. They see a sign indicating a wedding had been scheduled to occur. The Slayer heads outside to look for the Major, and instead discovers what the military, led by Major Booker, was doing with the hotel. They were processing survivors, but anyone they found to be infected, they were dissolving in the hotel pool using caustic X. Even those who were still alive, the unfortunate groom among them. Major Booker taunts the bride about this over the intercom, which causes zombies to flood into the pool area. After dispatching these zombies, the Slayer hears Major Booker over the intercom again, drunkenly ordering room service to room 307. The Slayer heads up to Major Booker's room, hearing along the way her continued taunts to the bride, until eventually being attacked by her. By the time the Slayer makes it to the Major's room, she has been killed. The Slayer is able to retrieve her key, however, and uses it to gain entry to the ballroom. Following the tradition of trustworthy voices over the radio, Dr. Reed tells the Slayer that he is part of the CDC, and upon hearing that the Slayer is immune, tells them that they are needed for a vaccine program. This conversation is cut short by the appearance of the blushing bride, who the Slayer is forced to put down along with some of her well-wishers. The Slayer then tells Dr. Reed that they will come to Santa Monica, but will need to enlist some help in getting there. They return to Emma's house in the hopes of convincing the others that they should all make the trip to the Sterling Hotel. Emma isn't thrilled about the idea, and also says the Slayer will not convince Sam B. The Slayer implores Emma to convince Sam, but she says she won't do anything until speaking with Michael. As the Slayer searches for Michael, they are drawn to a mysterious invitation. Picking it up, they find themselves transported to a house on a cliff. As they make their way inside to investigate, a recording starts playing automatically, with someone called Yong Ho welcoming a woman named Hope. The Slayer makes their way into the building, passing some familiar-looking portraits on the way. Inside the main hall, the Slayer finds 3 decapitated bodies, and a head which is still alive. When they replace the head, its owner introduces himself as Vincent. The Slayer asks how Vincent is still alive, to which he replies, "Technology," explaining that he is one of Constantine's chosen, as is the Slayer. That Constantine knows that the Slayer is to be the savior of Haus. The Slayer wants to meet Constantine, but unfortunately he is behind a sealed door. The only way to unlock it is to reunite the other 2 bodies with their heads. Vincent tells the Slayer that the first head belongs to Veronique, and that she is in a part of Haus called the Deeper. But to get there, the Slayer will need to go through the rites of passage. Fortunately, these are fairly straightforward, requiring the Slayer to give up something important to them by destroying it in a fire, endure agony by standing in an electrified pool, and confess a secret. After passing these rites, the Slayer is able to make their way underground into the Deeper. They find Veronique's head in her office. She reveals to the Slayer that Constantine knew the zombie apocalypse was coming, and all of this was in preparation for it, designed to preserve humanity through preparing candidates for ascension, the uploading of their consciousnesses. Unfortunately, Konstantin was a bit off in his predictions, and the zombie apocalypse came sooner than expected, and now it is up to the Slayer to save them all. The Slayer takes Veronique's head back to the main hall. When she comes to, she tells the Slayer that the third head belongs to Young-ho, and will be in the diner. To reach the diner, the Slayer will need to head into the forest, and find a weapon which had been carried by another of Konstantin's chosen, named Iris. Iris died in a well within the forest, but the way to the well is behind a locked gate. To unlock it, the Slayer needs to light 2 pyres, and then prove themselves in the arena by maiming zombies. With this done, the gate unlocks, and the Slayer is able to access the well and retrieve the weapon, a crossbow which can be used to shoot brains that are holding the gate to the diner locked. The diner was where candidates for ascension would be forced to eat their own arm. Luckily for the Slayer, the cook is no longer performing this role, and they are able to leave there with both their arms and Young-ho's head. When the Slayer places Young-ho's head on his body, they find that he had been infected, so when he reanimates, it is as a screamer. The Slayer is forced to put him down, but fortunately, just replacing his head was enough to allow Vincent and Veronique to get his code, and they are able to unlock the door to the infusion chamber where Konstantin is. This chamber is where the physical bodies of candidates who had passed the prior rites and trials would be killed. Here the Slayer is able to talk to Konstantin, and learn that he is an artificial intelligence, who had sent Joshua and Angelina to find the Slayer. The Slayer comments that Angelina bit them, and Konstantin tells them that this was necessary in order to connect to their mind. He tells the Slayer that the minds of those who are ascended are with him, and proves this by letting Hope speak to the Slayer. Hope tells them that she and the others who have ascended are in the Ark, and are ready to restore humanity once the storm has passed. But right now the Ark is under attack, and they need the Slayer's help. Convinced by Hope's plea, the Slayer goes through the next set of doors to look for the Ark, and sees a tunnel with pulsing energy. As they step into the energy, they hear a chorus of voices from the Ark saying that they are not ready. The Slayer then loses consciousness and awakens back at Emma Jaunt's house. Confused, they pick up the invitation again, trying to get back to Haus, but nothing happens. With Haus closed off to them for now, the Slayer goes back to looking for Michael. They learn that Michael has left the mansion, looking for a way to make Emma notice him again, now that the Slayer and Sam B have stolen the limelight. He has taken the keys to his home in Beverly Hills, so that is where the Slayer starts their search. Michael is not home, but there is a note from a neighbor, Jessie, telling Michael to stop in at her house. The Slayer eventually tracks Jessie down at a construction site, and she tells the Slayer that she had been making a whole lot of noise to give Michael a chance to slip into Monarch Studios. The Slayer makes their way to Monarch Studios to pursue Michael, and happens to come across an article referencing one Logan Carter, who is looking worse for wear, but at least he has a dog to keep him company. The Slayer searches for Michael among the different sets, finding a set of footprints and following them and piles of a strange goop to the set of Emma Jaunt's movie, The Rise of the God Spider. Michael had been hiding out in Emma Jaunt's trailer, hiding from a slobber zombie who had been pursuing him, and who was responsible for the piles of goop the Slayer had seen. The Slayer is able to use the set's special effects to help put the zombie down, and then enter Emma's trailer to find Michael standing over her Romero Award, though he insists he had come out primarily to collect medical supplies. Michael is lamenting that he cannot protect Emma, but the Slayer says that what Emma needs is his advice, and urges him to return to the mansion. While speaking with Michael, the Slayer receives a call over the radio from Sam B, who has a line on some guns, and asks the Slayer to meet him. The Slayer says to Michael that they should get him back to the mansion, as they don't want him to get bit. Michael says they don't need to worry about it. The rather unobservant Slayer gives no thought to this comment, nor to the bloody towel in the sink, the preoccupation with medical supplies, or even Michael's comment that he felt a bit hot. Instead, the Slayer just leaves him to it and heads off to meet Sam B. Leaving the lot, they find the way to Beverly Hills blocked by a closed gate, and have to make their way through the nearby water plant to track down the guy with the gate control room key. Recovering this key, the Slayer is able to open the gate and meet up with Sam B and Ronnie outside a house in Beverly Hills. The gate to the property is locked, but Sam B is able to break it open, drawing a fair amount of attention in the process. Sam B stays behind to hold these zombies off, while the Slayer and Ronnie go into the yard. Ronnie tells the Slayer that the home belongs to a big game hunter. He peers through the locked glass door, before being surprised by the lady herself, who has been transformed into a screamer. Her scream shatters the glass, and sends the Slayer flying back and knocks Ronnie to the ground, where she and some other common zombies set upon him. The Slayer avenges Ronnie and heads into the house to tell Sam B what happened. Sam B is not surprised, commenting that he had been bit to fuck, keeping Ronnie alive this long. The Slayer grabs a sporting rifle and goes upstairs to pick off zombies that have been drawn by the commotion, while Sam B packs up the other weapons around the house. When they are done, the Slayer tells Sam B about Dr. Reed, and Sam B warns him about voices on the radio. The Slayer heads back to Emma's mansion, and finds that Michael was infected. Sam B wants to put him down before he turns, but Emma refuses. So Sam B hands the gun to the Slayer to take care of it. Michael turns while Emma and the Slayer are arguing, and the Slayer has no choice but to eliminate him. This enrages Emma, who banishes them from the mansion. Before leaving, the Slayer stops to speak with Sam B, who suggests that they use the sewers as a safer way to travel to Santa Monica. The Slayer accepts this advice and makes their way into the sewer. As they make their way through the tunnels, they come across Patton, an ex-Army helicopter pilot, and Emma Jaunt fan, who had been living in the sewer. Patton declines to go with the Slayer to Santa Monica, but does give them directions and sends them on their way. The Slayer continues on and finds a section of the tunnels completely covered by flesh, the end result of the Army's grand idea of dissolving zombies and pumping the resulting soup into the sewer. The Slayer runs through the tunnel for their life as more and more zombies emerge from the biomass. As they make their way through, they come across a bridge over another pit filled with gore. As they start to make their way across, they are met by Lola Conrad and her companions Cadenza and Thurston. Lola says she had been looking for the Slayer and intends to help them let go. She indicates to Thurston, who stamps on the rickety bridge and sends the Slayer into the pit below. The Slayer finally feels the full effect of the autophagy, falling into a state of fury and tearing apart the zombies in the pit. When the Slayer regains control, they find their way to the Venice Beach exit and are finally able to leave the sewer. Making their way to the street, they see a survivor on the roof of the Blue Crab Grill. They help the survivors there by securing the parking lot outside the grill and are then invited inside. There they talk with the survivors until a crusher punches its way through the boards of the window and crushes one of the survivors' heads. After the other survivors disperse, the Slayer receives a radio call from Emma Jaunt, who explains that she had just been upset about Michael, and the Slayer did not really need to leave. They are welcome to come back to her mansion if their way out of LA doesn't work out. After ending the call with Emma, the Slayer notices a house invitation on the table. As they pick it up, they are transported back to Haus. As the Slayer re-enters the main hall, Veronique comments that they are changed and that they are now ready, to which Vincent agrees. They go back through the infusion chamber and pass through its fire doors again, back into the energy field. This time it triggers their newfound fury, and they pass through tunnels filled with zombies, heading towards the Ark. Nearby the Ark, they see hundreds of bodies suspended in orange bags, each with one arm removed, indicating that they had each passed Constantine's tests, and must be the bodies of the Ascended. At the Ark, the Slayer has to destroy brains, which are strangling the Ark. They also have to destroy the zombies that have made it this far. Once the last has been eliminated, the Slayer hears Constantin telling them to approach the Ark to receive a gift. A beam of energy hits the Slayer, and they lose consciousness. They see a vision of Lola Conrad in the sewer, and visions of the future. They also hear Hope thanking them. Coming to again in the hot tub of Emma Jaunt's mansion. The same strange white substance that had been leaking from Vincent and Veronique, now dripping from their own face. With the Ark safe, the Slayer goes back to the Blue Crab in Venice Beach. There they speak with Alex, one of the survivors. Alex says that the name of the Crusher who killed the other survivor is Dylan, and he was one of 2 buddies of Alex who were with him when their gym was overrun. Sadly for Dylan and Moose, Alex was the only one of the 3 that remembered not to skip leg day, and was the only one able to get away. Alex believes that Dylan and Moose remember that he left them, and that they are coming after him for revenge. The Slayer offers to bring them peace, and Alex tells them that he, Dylan, and Moose used to hang out at the gym and at the lot behind Lenny's. Sure enough, the Slayer finds Dylan behind Lenny's, and Moose is at the gym, though Moose is not really in any state to go after anyone. He is flat out with Patton digging around his insides. Patton tells the Slayer that different body parts of the different zombie variants have different properties, and can be used to give weapons special effects. The Slayer returns to Alex to let him know what became of his buddies. Alex in turn tells the Slayer that they can get to the Sterling Hotel by going through the military bases and quarantine corridors. Before making it to the military base, the Slayer hears a radio broadcast, warning everyone to stay away from the Sola Festival.
Stay away from the Sola Festival! Something is here! Something terrible!
Intrigued by this warning, given everything else that has been going on, the Slayer decides to investigate and make their way to the festival grounds. There they are confronted with the remains of people who had tried to leave. Making their way into the festival grounds, they see zombies wandering around, and an enclosed house, where the radio signal seems to be coming from. The Slayer makes their way into the compound, but just as they try to make contact with the survivor inside, they hear what sounds like a woman yelling, "I'll kill you," but turns out to be a new zombie variant, the self-destructive Whipper. After putting the Whipper down, the Slayer makes their way inside the house and follows the voice down to the basement. There they find Grace Tan, the survivor who had been broadcasting the warning. Grace explains that during the Solar Festival, something happened at the main stage. A strange beat caused 30,000 festival goers to turn into zombies in an instant. The beat had emanated from strange glass speakers. 2 of these speakers are nearby, one at the Fusion Zone and one at Indy Point. The Slayer tells Grace that they are going to investigate, and heads over to the first of these speakers. Once they boot up the speaker, they find it sends out an energy, which connects to nearby zombies. Killing the connected zombies overloads the speaker. Using the DJ deck, the Slayer sees a vision of a woman, who gives them a recording of the beat, and tells them the beat is fragmented, and they need to reassemble it. The Slayer goes to the other speaker, and after booting it up and taking down the nearby zombies to overload it, they see another vision of the woman, and receive another recording. While investigating the grounds, they find notes indicating that these speakers had come from OSK, and are therefore linked to Lola Conrad. The Slayer returns to Grace to ask about the woman they had seen in their vision, but Grace hasn't seen her. The Slayer tells Grace that they are going to the main stage to investigate further, and while Grace tries to convince them not to go, she eventually tells them that they'll need to go through the eco-village to get to the main stage. The Slayer makes their way through the village. As they do so, they come across a hut seeming to be set aside for more candidates for Haus. The Slayer continues on their way, eventually coming to a large pavilion, in front of which is a still spinning turbine. The Slayer sends a bunch of zombies through the turbine until it eventually breaks, before making their way to the pavilion. As the Slayer opens the pavilion, the remains of the minced zombies turn into 3 clotters, another new zombie variant. The main one is called the Dirge, who speaks to the Slayer with something of a collective intelligence, before leaving the Slayer and the other clotters behind. The Slayer puts the other 2 clotters down and continues on to the main stage. There, the Slayer switches the speakers on and wipes out the surrounding zombies to overload them and isolate the beat. They are contacted by the woman again, and she tells them to find the version of her in their world. The Slayer decides to look for her at the Eclipse Club, but as they go to leave the main stage, the Dirge appears. The Slayer is unable to harm the Dirge, and all they can do is flee. Once they have escaped, they make their way to the club. There they find Cadenza, and learn that she is the dancing woman they have been seeing. They tell Cadenza that other versions of her have been giving them recordings of the beat. She asks for the recordings and the Slayer hands them over, asking how they can stop the beat. Cadenza says they don't, that she only had one part, but with the 3 the Slayer just gave her, she can now recombine the beat and listen to its message. She believes that the beat holds the answers to what they are. Cadenza then leaves and the Slayer goes to warn Grace that Cadenza intends to play the beat. The Slayer finds Grace rocking back and forth in pain from several speakers having been turned on and broadcasting the beat. The Slayer goes out to shut each of these down and returns to check on Grace. Grace has recovered with the speakers being turned off, but when the Slayer tells her that Cadenza is going to listen to the beat, she is furious, and she refuses to leave the festival grounds, telling the Slayer to get out instead. No longer welcome in Grace's home and not knowing where Cadenza has gone or how long it might take her to reassemble the beat, the Slayer has no choice but to leave the festival grounds and continue to make their way to the Serling Hotel and Dr. Reed. Returning to Santa Monica, the Slayer follows the directions Alex had given them and makes their way through the military base and quarantine corridor. Along the way, seeing the massive hordes of zombies, the quarantiner managed to keep at bay before the military fell. Arriving at the Serling Hotel, they finally meet Dr. Reuben Reed, who tells them that the CDC will send a chopper to take the Slayer to the CDC in Colorado. This conversation is interrupted by Dr. Reed's daughter, Tisha, who is urging her father to do something about the hotel survivors running out of food. Dr. Reed tells the Slayer to rest up while he contacts the CDC. The Slayer crashes for a while, and when they wake up, they go to check in with Dr. Reed, but he isn't there. Apparently, someone got sick and he went to treat them. The hotel survivors have also added an interruption to the water supply to their list of issues, and the janitor who had gone to fix the water has not come back. With Dr. Reed not around anyway, the Slayer heads to the basement to look for the janitor and to help get the water back on. In a shockingly unforeseeable turn of events, the lone janitor sent into the basement of the zombie-infested building has been turned, and the Slayer has to put them down before turning the water back on. When the Slayer gets back upstairs, Dr. Reed has returned but has bad news. The CDC didn't answer his call. The military has taken over, and they will only allow the Slayer out of LA if they can prove their immunity. In order to provide proof of immunity, Dr. Reed will need a blood sample, and he directs the Slayer to the CDC lab at the pier to take a sample of their blood. At the CDC lab, the Slayer sees the experiments the CDC was conducting as they tried to understand the zombie virus. The lab had fallen, with the doctors and researchers being wiped out. The lab equipment is still working though, and the Slayer is able to obtain a sample of their blood. Since nothing is ever easy, the sample alone is not enough, and in order to test the sample, Dr. Reed needs a blood drive computer. This was meant to have been recovered from the pier and taken to the lifeguard tower, but it was not. Instead, the Slayer needs to track it down. As they make their way across the pier, they sense something stalking them, and they are eventually attacked by a butcher variant wearing clown makeup. They are able to knock the butcher off the Ferris wheel, and it temporarily scampers off again. At the very end of the pier, they find the blood drive still in the hands of a CDC worker. As they take it, they are attacked by the clown again and need to put it down before finally claiming the blood drive. The Slayer starts to make their way back across the pier, but it collapses beneath them, sending them into the water below. After coming to on the beach, they make their way back to Dr. Reed and find him in conversation with Lola Conrad. Dr. Reed says he and Lola had done some research together, and Lola says that she was his muse. The Slayer confronts Lola about casting him into the pit of horrors in the sewer and trying to kill them. Lola asks if that was what she did or if she did something different. Dr. Reed admonishes her, saying she had promised not to interfere, to which she says they had both promised not to interfere. One of the other hotel survivors then interrupts the conversation to tell Dr. Reed that Tisha had left the hotel to search for food and is now overdue. Lola takes this opportunity to slip away, and Dr. Reed begs the Slayer to find Tisha, telling them that analysing the blood will take some time anyway. The Slayer heads into the city to look for Tisha, and finds her and her friends in an apartment. They have been investigating her father. Tisha tells the Slayer that data is being sent between the Sterling Hotel, where her dad is, the CDC HQ, and the Randgate building. Tisha offers to give the Slayer a direct line to Lola if they give her more time to investigate. The Slayer agrees, and in return, Tisha gives them a code word to use at the OSK store, and after rebooting the system and using the code word, the Constantine system starts up and begins by defining the word Skartan, the end of the world, the end times, the final event in the divine plan. Constantine then plays a conversation that had occurred between Dr. Reed and someone called Noah, who was apparently another immune. Dr. Reed is telling Noah that they need to get him to a lab on Ocean Avenue. The system then plays another conversation between Dr. Reed and a researcher, with Dr. Reed saying that the experiment didn't work and that they would need to find a new candidate. Constantine then sends the Slayer an image of Service Entry 7 for the Randgate building. They go to investigate and find Noah's remains still on the lab table, apparently dead. As they fire up the blood drive to see what Dr. Reed had intended to do with them, there is a malfunction, and an electrical surge runs through the equipment and into Noah, who awakens as a mutator. The Slayer fights Noah, eventually falling into a fury. When he has been put down, the Slayer tries to overcome the fury, but instead it drives them to attack Tisha, who stabs them with a crossbow bolt and knocks them out. The Slayer comes to again with Lola, Thurston, and Cadenza standing over them. Lola calls what the Slayer is going through a rebirth, and explains that they are all Newman, the endpoint for humanity. Lola tells the Slayer that Dr. Reed is not making a cure, because there is none. They go back to the Sterling Hotel to confront Dr. Reed, but as they approach the building, they see a helicopter taking off. Inside the hotel, they find Jimmy in Dr. Reed's office, and he pulls a gun on them, having gone through Dr. Reed's stuff and discovering that Dr. Reed was behind the outbreak. The Slayer tells Jimmy that they weren't involved, and that Dr. Reed had told them their blood was a cure, and they were only trying to help. Jimmy tells the Slayer that Dr. Reed and Tisha have gone to a lab on Hollywood Boulevard, before leaving to take charge of the other survivors. With no prospects of contributing to a cure, the Slayer decides to focus on getting the hell out of LA. They contact Emma Jaunt and tell her about Reed's helicopter, asking her to come with him and to help him convince Patton to fly them out of there. And the Slayer arranges to meet up with her and Sam. As the Slayer goes to leave the hotel, they are contacted by Cadenza. She has successfully recombined the beat from the Sola Festival, and she asks the Slayer to go to the OSK store to obtain the file containing the beat from Constantine, and to send it to her. Constantine is not happy with Cadenza, but considers the Slayer a friend, so when the Slayer asks him to send the file to Cadenza, he does it immediately. It is not until after the recording is sent that the Slayer thinks to ask Constantine what Cadenza had done wrong, to which Constantine plays a recording of a conversation between Cadenza and Lola Conrad. Lola is telling Cadenza that she is reckless, and that it is too dangerous for her to have the recording. Constantine notes that the beat is a switch, which turns the autophage in the listener's DNA on, and that while the other organ speakers at the festival had been small, the speaker in the Eclipse Club is capable of broadcasting the beat all around the world. The Slayer realizes that this is Cadenza's intention, and asks if Constantine can get the file back, but it is too late. They rush back to the Sola Festival, and find that Cadenza has started to play the beat, and that it is having ripple effects throughout the festival grounds. Grace isn't in her compound, and the Slayer realizes that she must have gone back to the main stage. They are then contacted by Cadenza telepathically, and they ask her to wait, saying that they need to get Grace out of there. Cadenza believes that she has the beat under control, and she tells the Slayer to do what they need to do. The Slayer heads to the main stage and finds Grace there. They discover that she is also a Newman, and she is now going through her rebirth. She hears the voices of other Newmen, and the Slayer convinces her to listen to them, and to let them help her. Once Grace has successfully gone through her rebirth, the Slayer heads over to the club to stop Cadenza. They find that she has been fully taken over by the beat, but with Grace's help, the Slayer is able to break her free from it. As they do so, the Dirge appears, and Condenser tells the Slayer that she can disrupt the beat, but not for long, and that the Slayer needs to kill the Dirge. The Dirge is still immune to these Slayer's attacks, but there are orgone speakers nearby which start to activate a couple at a time. As they do so, the Slayer is able to destroy them by killing connected zombies. Each time a set of speakers is destroyed, the Slayer is able to throw an orgone ball at the Dirge to render it vulnerable. The Slayer is then able to damage it. Finally, the Slayer destroys the last of the speakers and throws the final orgone ball at the Dirge, overloading the master speaker the Dirge is connected with. The Dirge is disassembled and the beat cut out for good. Cadenza comments that the beat is not silenced, but can't reach here anymore. She also says that when the beat took her, it knew her completely and she knew it. Cadenza does not elaborate on what she means, and leaves the Slayer with no more answers. Before leaving the festival, the Slayer checks in on Grace one last time, and finds her fully recovered, and accepting of her existence as a Newman. With the Sola Festival grounds now at least as quiet as the rest of LA, the Slayer departs and returns to the city. They make it back to Emma Jaunt's house, but Emma and Sam B are not there. Andrea tells the Slayer that Emma and Sam were keen to leave, and will be waiting for them in the sewer. Sure enough, when the Slayer heads back into the sewer, they find Emma and Sam B just outside of Patton's place. Patton is starstruck to see Emma and agrees to fly them out of LA. The group heads into the sewers towards Hollywood Boulevard, though Sam isn't feeling too hot and believes he has the flu. The Slayer gets separated from the others and has to take the longer way around. They meet up with the group at Hollywood Boulevard, and the four make their way up to the helipad. Sam has gotten worse and has accepted that he is infected, and isn't going anywhere. The Slayer decides to track down Dr. Reed to see if they can stop him from doing whatever it is he is doing. They follow Tisha's crossbow bolts to a clinic and find a secret Ascartan lab. Inside they find Tisha and Dr. Reed. The Slayer confronts Reed about causing the outbreak, and he confesses that he did. He started the outbreak in order to find Newman, killing millions in order to save billions, by finding Newman and using them to create a cure. He has made one cure for his troubles. However, Reed also confesses that after making his discovery about Newman, he did something else, modifying an unborn baby, Tisha, so that with Newman blood, she would become the cure, to be harvested every day for the rest of her life. Dr. Reed urges the Slayer to get Tisha out of there and out of LA, and then turns into a mutator. Tisha flees while the Slayer dispatches her father. With Reed dead, the Slayer makes their way out of the lab, and upon not seeing Tisha, makes their way back to the helipad. There they ask Patton if he has seen Tisha, but he hasn't. The Slayer gives that one precious dose of the cure to Sam B, and says he is going to stay in order to find Tisha and the cure. Patton then flies Sam B and Emma out, leaving the Slayer behind. Lola Conrad had been watching this exchange with Thurston and Condenser, and she asks if the Slayer had decided to stay with them. The Slayer tells her that they had stayed to save Tisha, and Lola asks if that was the only reason, before walking away. The Slayer heads back out onto Hollywood Boulevard to start their search for Tisha. And that is as far as the Slayer's story goes, at least for now. With humanity's only hope for a cure running through the veins of a girl alone in a dead city, and with a group of Newmen who may not want a cure to exist at all, Dead Island 2 has left us with one hell of a cliffhanger. Let's hope it doesn't take another 12 years for Dead Island 3 to finally give us an ending to this story. Let me know what you think of the franchise so far, and if you think Dead Island 2 was worth the wait. Oh, and if anyone else is unreasonably annoyed that this most recent Dead Island did not in fact take place on an island, please let me know that as well.